Did you know that 90% of books don't make it past the first few chapters? Most readers decide if they're going to finish a book in the first 5 minutes. For fantasy writers, this means your plot has to be exciting and engaging from the very start, or your audience might not stick around. But here's the catch. Many new fantasy writers make the same 6 critical mistakes that can easily turn a great idea into a dull story. Mistakes like starting too slow, relying too much on magic, or even having villains who feel like cardboard cutouts. These common errors can ruin your plot and make your story forgettable. In this video, we'll break down these mistakes and show you how to avoid them. If you want your fantasy story to captivate readers and stand out, keep watching. We'll teach you strategies that will make your plot unforgettable, your characters relatable, and your twists mind-blowing. Ready to level up your writing? Let's dive in. Chapter 1, The Boring Beginning. When the quest starts wrong, starting your fantasy story with a dull introduction can doom your plot from the start. Most readers will abandon a book if they're not hooked in the first few pages. According to a study by the bookseller, 80% of people decide within the first few pages whether they want to continue reading. Fantasy writers often fall into the trap of explaining the world, its rules, and history right away, which can feel like an information dump. Instead of overloading the reader, start with action or an intriguing scene. Think about how The Hobbit opens. Bilbo's quiet life gets interrupted by a visit from Gandalf. It's not an exposition dump, it's a door opening to adventure. By introducing an active scene, you immediately make the reader care about the world. The key is balancing the world building with the plot. Let details emerge naturally through the story, not through paragraphs of background. One solid strategy is to introduce your main conflict within the first few pages. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, we don't get a long explanation of how the magical world works. Instead, we witness Harry's miserable life before discovering the truth about his past. This creates immediate tension and curiosity. Readers don't need everything up front, they need a reason to keep reading. Think about pacing. Fantasy writers often fall into the trap of slow starts. A good rule of thumb is to ask, does this scene move the plot forward? If it doesn't, cut it. The longer you take to introduce the heart of your story, the more likely you are to lose the reader's attention. Lastly, take a note from The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. The protagonist, Kaveth, begins his story by sharing a pivotal, exciting moment from his past. This instantly pulls readers into his world and makes them curious about how he got to that point. Your beginning should create the promise of adventure, not delay it. Chapter 2, The Overloaded Magic. When powers become plot crutches, magic is a hallmark of fantasy, but relying on it too much can quickly make your plot feel shallow. Many new writers use magic to fix problems too easily, which can make their story feel predictable. When a character can wave a wand and solve everything, it removes the stakes. In The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien doesn't use magic to solve every problem. Instead, it's often a mysterious and rare force, which keeps the tension high. One of the most important things you can do as a writer is to set limits on your magical systems. A common mistake is creating an all-powerful magic system with no boundaries. But when magic has rules, it becomes more interesting. Think about the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. His system of magic is complex, with limitations and costs that make it far more engaging. The key is balance. Magic should enhance the plot, not remove the tension. Incorporate consequences into your magical system. For example, in Mistborn, the use of magic costs the user something, whether it's strength, lifespan, or something else. This makes magic feel earned and keeps the reader invested. When a character faces a difficult choice between using magic or not, it raises the stakes. Another strategy is to use magic to reveal character traits or drive growth. Magic isn't just a tool to win battles, it can be a personal struggle. In A Song of Ice and Fire, characters like Daenerys struggle to control their power. Magic becomes a reflection of their inner journey, making it much more compelling. Use your magic system as a tool for growth, not just for solving problems. Lastly, don't let magic overshadow character development. The core of any great fantasy story is the characters, not their abilities. In The Wheel of Time, the magic is important, but it never eclipses the relationships, the internal struggles, and the growth of the characters themselves. Magic should serve your story, not dominate it. Chapter 3, The Villain You Can't Touch. Creating unrelatable antagonists. A great villain can elevate your entire story, but many new fantasy writers make the mistake of creating villains who are either too powerful or too flat. A villain who is too far removed from the protagonist feels unrelatable and fails to create the emotional tension necessary for a gripping story. The Lion King offers a great example. Scar, despite being an evil character, has clear motivations tied to his relationship with Simba. He feels real because his actions come from his own desires, not just an abstract evil. One key mistake is creating villains who are evil for the sake of being evil. The best villains are often driven by relatable motivations. For instance, in Harry Potter, Voldemort's actions are driven by fear of death and a desire for power. These motivations are human, even if taken to an extreme. It's important that your villain feels like they have a reason for their actions, even if you don't agree with them. Another strategy is to give your villain a personal connection to the protagonist. In Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader is not just an anonymous threat, he is Luke's father. This makes their conflict much more intense, and it pushes Luke's character growth. A villain who is personally connected to the hero makes the stakes higher because it's not just about winning the battle, it's about winning on a deeper, emotional level. Don't forget that a villain's weaknesses are just as important as their strengths. A villain who has no flaws can feel more like a plot device than a character. In The Hobbit, Smaug is nearly invincible, but his arrogance and overconfidence make him vulnerable. This gives your protagonist an opportunity to defeat them, but it also makes the villain more interesting. Lastly, show your villains humanity. Even the most terrifying characters should have moments of vulnerability or doubt. In the Broken Earth trilogy, the antagonist is deeply flawed, and their motivations are shown in a way that makes you almost sympathize with them. A well-rounded villain is far more compelling than a one-dimensional evil force. If you're enjoying these tips so far, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapters. Chapter 4, The Plot That's All Filler. Don't let your journey be meaningless. One common mistake in fantasy writing is creating long, meandering plots full of filler. Writers sometimes introduce side quests or adventures that don't move the story forward. But remember, every scene should have a purpose. In The Fellowship of the Ring, Tolkien doesn't let his characters waste time. Even seemingly small moments, like the journey through the mines of Moria, build tension and reveal something important about the characters. One trick is to ask yourself, what does this scene accomplish? If it doesn't reveal something about the world, move the plot forward, or develop your characters, it might be time to cut it. A study by the University of Edinburgh found that stories with unnecessary filler lose reader engagement fast. If your reader feels like nothing important is happening, they might stop reading. The journey in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire is a great example. While Harry competes in the Triwizard Tournament, the trials may seem like side adventures. But each task reveals something important about his character and the growing darkness around him. Each obstacle he faces builds to the larger story, keeping the reader invested. Instead of random side plots, integrate subplots that support the main narrative. In The Name of the Wind, Patrick Rothfuss weaves the protagonist Cavorta's backstory into the larger plot. The smaller pieces of his journey don't just serve as filler, they build the bigger picture of who Cavith is and what he will become. Also, consider pacing. A filler scene often feels like it drags on too long, causing the story to slow. If you feel that pace dragging, it might be because your scenes lack emotional or plot-driven weight. Tightening your focus will help maintain a sense of urgency and prevent the reader from losing interest. The key takeaway here is that your reader's time is precious. Don't waste it. Make every scene count. Keep things moving, and stay focused on the ultimate goal of your story. Chapter 5, The Lost Character Arc. When heroes don't change, one of the most important elements of fantasy is the hero's journey. But if your protagonist doesn't grow or change throughout the story, the plot can feel empty. In The Lord of the Rings, Frodo's transformation is subtle but powerful. He starts as a naive hobbit and, by the end, has grown into a character who understands the true cost of heroism. Without change, your reader won't feel like the adventure was worthwhile. A static protagonist is often a sign of a plot that's too focused on action. Action sequences are fun, but they don't have the emotional depth of a well-constructed character arc. The key is to ask, how does my character grow from this experience? The best fantasy stories have heroes who learn from their failures and become better, or worse, people because of them. A great example of this is the Witcher series by Andrzej Sapkowski. Geralt of Rivia doesn't change as drastically as Frodo, but his personal journey evolves in subtle ways. He deals with love, loyalty, and the consequences of his actions. His arc isn't about defeating a villain, it's about learning to live with the choices he makes. This personal growth is what makes him feel human and relatable. In The Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen's arc is another brilliant example. She starts as a reluctant hero, but through her experiences, she becomes a symbol of rebellion. Her character development is tied to the larger plot, making every action meaningful. As she faces the horrors of the games, her growth becomes an essential part of the story's emotional core. A well-developed character arc creates emotional payoff. Readers care about the characters who struggle and change. To build a solid arc, map out your protagonist's growth from the start. Think about where they begin, where they end, and what internal or external forces drive their change. By focusing on the journey within the journey, the character's growth, you'll make your plot far more engaging. Enjoying the video so far? Hit that subscribe button and don't forget to ring the bell so you won't miss any upcoming writing tips. Chapter 6, The Endless Plot Twists. When surprise becomes a trap, plot twists can be thrilling, but when overused, they lose their impact. A constant barrage of twists can make your story feel more like a puzzle than an emotional journey. A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin is filled with unexpected twists, but each one serves to deepen the themes of power, trust, and betrayal. When twists feel like they belong, they elevate the story. When they feel forced, they can break the reader's immersion. The key to a successful twist is foreshadowing. If a twist comes out of nowhere without any hints, it can feel cheap. Instead, drop subtle clues along the way, so when the twist hits, it feels earned. In The Sixth Sense, M. Night Shyamalan doesn't reveal the twist until the very end, but upon rewatching, viewers notice subtle signs pointing to it. The twist is a payoff, not a random shock. Think about character motivations too. A good twist often comes from deep character exploration. If your villain's motivation changes unexpectedly, it needs to make sense. In The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, the twists in the story arise from the complexity of the characters and their relationships. Each surprise feels natural because it's built on the characters' personalities and goals. Too many twists can also dilute the emotional power of each surprise. In The Twilight Zone, a fantasy classic, every episode delivers a twist. But because each twist ties into the broader theme of the show, the payoff always feels meaningful. You don't need a twist in every chapter, focus on key moments where the twist will have maximum impact. Additionally, don't let your twists undermine the stakes. If your readers are always wondering, what's the twist? They may stop caring about the story itself. In The Hunger Games, the twists feel authentic because they tie back to the broader conflict of rebellion, making them part of the larger story. Remember, twists are best when they serve the plot and deepen the emotional impact. They should be the unexpected revelation that connects the dots of your story in a way that surprises and resonates. If you found these strategies helpful, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll always be the first to learn how to improve your fantasy writing.